Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome back to a film theory reaction, and quite literally, the last film theory reaction I'm doing for the year, because, well, it's the last film theory reaction of the year. So, this is what I assume is the second part of their Disney theory, I think it was called? The Fall of the Disney Empire. Okay. I'm genuinely curious how that's going to work into the whole timeline here. Unless, in-universe Disney turns into, like, Star Wars, and then that collapses or something. I honestly don't know. Second, though, there is another thing. Because while it is about Welcome Home, it is just a compilation of all the previous Welcome Home theories put together into one hour-long video. And, I mean, if you look through my playlist, I've already watched all of them individually. And, yeah, I mean, I know I did tune in the very beginning, and they did say there was some new stuff, like, from little updates and stuff, but honestly, I'm not going to go through an entire hour-long video to find maybe the 5 to 10 minutes of new stuff that's there. It's really not worth it, and, and as a side note, I know, reaction content gets a bad rap a lot of the time, most of the time for, good reasons. But that just doesn't seem worth it for me, really. Basically, it's very much the same reasons why I didn't watch the 4-hour compilation of Alex Bale's SpongeBob theories with the added mini-theories and just watched his mini-theories video. But yeah, with all of that, rather needed preamble aside, I guess we should probably get this thing started yet and see where this Disney timeline goes. So, yeah, of course, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason. Corner video, link to my... I guess it's not going to be a game theory this time, I'll link to my last Let's Play. But yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that always wishes upon a star no matter who you are. So, if you've been around YouTube, you may have seen something called the Pixar theory floating around from creators like the Super Carlin brothers. The idea there is to take every single Pixar film and try to put them into a single story. This Pixar theory is a monumental feat, but I looked at it and thought, what if we could do something bigger? What if we could take all of Disney's main animated movies and do something similar, putting them all into a single story and creating the ultimate Disney theory.
Which, as I said in my reaction to the first part of this, I am actually liking this Disney theory a lot more than the Pixar theory. Because unlike the Pixar theory, which most of its connecting tissue, apart from, direct sequels, is literally just, like, picking and choosing certain Easter eggs to use in the backgrounds of stuff. As I said then, the main thing that took me out of the Pixar theory was trying to fit cars in there somewhere. But this, as I said in the previous one, I'm liking the Disney theory a lot more because they're not having to focus on, just using Easter eggs. They're actually putting it into a millennia-long time scale with, like, movies about dinosaurs and the creation of the universe and all that. Now, that being said, even Lee pointed out last video that, the difficult times were coming up because they're going to have to try to work in, like, the animated Robin Hood where everybody's an animal, and Zootopia, and, basically the talking animal movies. And while they have pointed out, like, the Disney magic that makes this whole thing possible has created, well, what was at one point called funny animals, the bipedal talking animals. It's very much been just humans up to this point, and the talking animals have just been, off to the side. I don't know, like, what you want to classify them as, like, repressed populations or whatever, depending on the world. But, stuff like, Robin Hood and Zootopia, they're just animals, and seemingly from what we've seen in those movies, they've always just been animals. So, where those fit in, whether there was some sort of apocalypse that caused humans to go extinct or something, I'm going to be very interested to see how they, fit all this stuff in.
Last time we covered everything up to about the year 1900, ranging from the Big Bang and the creation of Earth all the way up to the interactions between the kingdoms we see in European fairy tales like Cinderella and The Little Mermaid. But how does all of this connect to the likes of Wreck-It Ralph, or Lilo and Stitch, or Zootopia?
I mean, Wreck-It Ralph, that's, relatively easy. You just have it set, in anywhere in America in an arcade, and just have the arcade characters, come to life. Again, they've said that Disney magic is a thing, so we'll just say that Disney magic causes video game characters to become alive, and there you go.
Well, friends, today we're gonna find out. Oh, and just before we hop in, last time I asked you all which Disney princess you thought would win in a fight: Elsa, Moana, or Rapunzel. And let me tell you, loyal theorists, y'all delivered. This was my highest commented video ever, and the top 5 highest commented videos of Film Theory this year. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas and really thoughtful reasoning on this whole subject. You guys are awesome. So, who did you think would win? Well, the audience pick by a landslide,
I would have just said
rather
Elsa.
an avalanche, was Elsa,
Yeah.
mostly due to her ice powers. And hey, you know what? That makes sense. I can see it. She got so many votes that we scrolled for 10 minutes trying to count up how many she had, and it crashed YouTube's backend before we were able to count them all up.
I mean, at that point, why not just go Control F and, type in, I think it was Glacier or something? That's how they, sorted through them. I mean, and just count, how many it comes up.
In the end, she tallied up 5,030 votes. Wild!
Wow,
As for
okay.
second place, it was a surprisingly tight race between Moana and Rapunzel, but Moana just squeaked out a victory. A lot of votes were also put in before people had a chance to see Moana 2, and I wonder if that would have impacted things. Either way, this was a super fun experiment, and I definitely think we should do this Disney Princess Battle Royale theory someday. After all, I wonder how the likes of Mulan, or Merida, or Raya would do, or if someone like Snow White or Cinderella could eke out a win. I mean, probably not on that one, but hey, it's a fun idea. Anyway, thank you again for your help on this, and with all of that said, let's jump back into the Disney theory. So last time we stopped off with The Jungle Book in the 1890s, but there's so much more to go. For instance, it's here where we come to another pivotal moment in the Disneyverse just from the sheer amount of important elements that all happened in one place.
Really?
Pinocchio, which takes place
Oh,
in Italy.
okay. Yeah,
we
I guess I
can
could
also
see
pin this
that.
one down to the 1890s thanks to the Ferris wheel we see in the amusement park. And thankfully, this lines up with a lot of other evidence we see from the Disney canon. For instance, we can see one of Geppetto's earlier puppets in Corona during the events of Tangled about 50 years before, which checks out with just how old Geppetto would be at this point. But an even more significant connection might be
Okay.
to a movie you're not expecting, The
Oh, The Emperor's New Groove.
Think about it. The Pleasure Island operation we see in Pinocchio is built on potions that transform boys into donkeys. Sound familiar? Pinocchio even takes place when Peru and Italy expanded their trade relationship in the real world. And we know that a number of the donkeys get shipped to salt mines. As it turns out, Peru is home to one of the longest running salt mines on the planet, which uses donkeys to this very day. So, you heard it here.
Really?
The potion that transforms the kids in Pinocchio is the same one from The Emperor's New Groove. Whew, that one took a lot to find the date, but thankfully our next entry makes...
Now, if that's, that would make sense. Now, I just have to wonder, where did it come from? Because, actually, yeah, thinking about it, probably the potion came from the New World and it was brought back to the Old World. Because we did see, in the Emperor's New Groove, just the absolute massive collection of different potions that Yzma had and the types that she could make. So it's very much, obviously it would probably be a much more, a much older and more developed practice in the New World as opposed to the Old. And that,
makes things super easy. Rounding out the 1800s, we have The Great Mouse Detective, set in London during 1897,
Also a very
which we
good
know
movie.
thanks to a date on a handy newspaper. This movie is also the closest we're ever going to get to a Disney animated Sherlock Holmes, which makes me sad. I'd love to see that personally. But
again, you just gotta love it when the movie specifically states what year they actually take place in. It makes things so much easier for stuff like this.
there's no need to dwell on that, just like there's no need to dwell on Make Mine Music, a collection of animated shorts, most of which are set in America. This bad boy's not even on Disney Plus, but it's part of the Disney canon, so we gotta count it. Most of the shorts are dotted across the first half of the 1900s, and they don't really leave much of an impact, so yeah, moving on. Just
Yeah, okay.
like The Great Mouse Detective, the next movie in the timeline also prominently features the Big Ben Clock Tower. I'm of course talking about Peter Pan,
Peter
set in
Pan.
1904 as confirmed in the film's pre-release promotional material.
Here, the city of London, back in 1904.
This film also once again goes hard on the magic of wishes.
Again, always forget that weird, creepy face Peter Pan makes. Ugh.
And belief in fairies. There's a reason it's a Disney classic. A movie that didn't leave much of an impact, though, The Wind in the Willows from The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. This story was about some talking toads that takes place basically at the same time as Peter Pan in the English countryside, just a year later in 1905, which we know thanks to a dated invoice. And just like The Great Mouse Detective, it's another case of a sentient human-animal creature. Just thought I'd point that out, it will become relevant later. Heading across the pond, we actually have to make a pit stop in San Francisco.
Which again, as I said before, like I'm thinking that the way it's been kind of working up to this point is that, you know, the human and animal populations for the most part are very segregated.
Here, a scientist named Lenore Shimamoto was experimenting with some sort of new power source, but her invention inadvertently amplified the great 1906 San Francisco earthquake enough that it became known as just the Great Catastrophe. Thankfully, the city was rebuilt with the help of Japanese immigrants, whose influence on the city had it redubbed as San Fransokyo. But here's the thing, the power source that Shimamoto was creating, it was a star.
It created a star. A star?
Yeah, she was trying to harness the same star magic that set the Disneyverse on this wildly different path. The same.
Wait, so just thinking. Okay, so that's why it's called that in Big Hero 6. I'd always wondered why it was called San Fransokyo. Interesting, huh?
Same stuff I assume the Atlanteans got their hands on and blew up like the whole world. Just goes to show how powerful this stuff is and how it continued to alter the Disneyverse even this far along the timeline. Heading over to New Orleans, we have Lady and the Tramp, which mostly takes place in 1908 based on a calendar marking a baby's delivery date. April of 1908 was the only month around this time that had April 1st fall on a Wednesday. And before we take a break from our animal-centric movies, we have to head from the French Quarter to France itself, where we have the Aristocats, set in Paris in the year 1910. Again, you just have to love it when they make it easy with these superimposed texts.
It's so easy,
we love it.
Thank you.
Something that was not as easy though? Well, we're gonna put Tarzan in Africa also in the year 1910. Why would this one be hard? Well, first off, there's a popular theory floating around online that Tarzan's parents are actually King Agnar and Queen Iduna from Frozen. One of Frozen's co-directors actually has this headcanon themselves. But that doesn't really line up with the other things we know about these movies. For instance, it's said that the parents in Frozen were sailing to attend a wedding, the wedding of Rapunzel and Eugene from Tangled, which we've established takes place in Western or Central Europe.
So if they somehow got to Africa, yeah, that's kind of, they're very off course there. But also that theory about, you know, Tarzan, I have heard that one before, specifically actually, so again, if you've heard of Nostalgia Critic and his channel Awesome, they have this series on there that sometimes comes up called Fanscription, where they literally just, you know, partially animate, illustrate, like fan stories, like what if like the other two original Batman movies in the 90s more closely followed the first one, you know, that sort of stuff. And they did one specifically about that theory, about like what if Tarzan was like related to Elsa in Frozen and stuff like that.
The Frozen parents were coming from Norway to go to that wedding. Why would they be close enough to Central Africa to wash up and build a house there? And secondly, honestly, I just don't see the resemblance here. We physically see all four of the parents in these films, and I just don't think that they look enough alike to make up for the difference in geography.
Though, I mean, you also do gotta love how just Tarzan basically just looks like his dad, like just completely.
And also, as we're about to see, the timeline it doesn't match up. So, okay, that gets us away from Frozen, but what else is the problem? Well, Jane and her father mentioned that Tarzan should meet a number of famous people back in England.
Darwin and Kipling, Queen Victoria!
But the problem here is that there was no point where all of these people would have been both alive and famous at the same time. Darwin died in 1882, years before Kipling published the works that would earn him his fame. What's more, there's also projector slides featuring the Eiffel Tower, which wasn't completed until 1889, and an airplane, which wasn't invented until 1903.
Well, that's not a plane, though. That's a glider. It has no engine.
Basically, this whole movie's a bit of a timey-wimey mess, so to land on our date here, we're going to go with the latest possible time that it could take place. And we get that thanks to The Legend of Tarzan, the animated series spin-off of the film.
Right,
In one episode, Tarzan meets U.S. President Teddy Roosevelt during his famous year-long African expedition that concluded in 1910. So, in the same same way that there were small changes thanks to the star magic in the Disneyverse, we're gonna say that a lot of the lifespans of a few historical figures got extended. Queen Victoria gets to see her 90th birthday, and Charles Darwin lasts the ripe old age of 100.
Okay, well, actually, how old was Queen Victoria when she died? Because that could potentially 1901 at 64. So 64 is 26. That would mean that Queen Victoria in the Disney universe potentially, reigned until 1927 after the First World War. Oh god, okay, that throws things. Actually, wait a second. If she was still alive at that point, maybe that might have mean that World War I never actually happened because she kind of held all of the royal families of Europe together for a while there. Oh, maybe, actually, no, then with the assassination, maybe she wouldn't. Oh, God, this is weird.
You've read Darwin. It's called natural selection.
Perfect segue, because that brings us to the main events of Atlantis: The Lost Empire, set in 1914 per the superimposed text at the start of the film. Easy, we love it. This movie really shows us how the development of technology has also been enhanced by the influence of star magic.
Yeah, giant steampunk submarine. Love it.
Though submarines existed in the real world as early as the 1620s, the subs in World War I were nowhere near what we see in Atlantis. And trust me, things get much crazier later on because of this.
And again, once again, steam powered. There is a boiler room in this thing.
We took a big hit down here and we're taking our water fast. I don't want to be around when it hits the boilers.
And people have tried out steam powered submarines. They don't really work that well given that, they use fire. So that would mean potentially that they have some other form of power generating the heat to make the steam. So maybe it's like the weird star magic. Maybe it's not oil, but maybe that's really primitive nuclear technology. Who knows?
But for now, we have to head back to New Orleans for the events of The Princess and the Frog. This is set in 1926, which we know thanks to a newspaper, and shows us yet another case of magic turning people like Tiana and Naveen into animals. And in a slightly different case of talking animals, we then have both Winnie the Pooh and the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh.
I mean, I know, again, no star magic, but could you count some of these guys as talking animals? Because I mean, you have rabbit and owl, obviously they're, actual talking animals, but you have, Kanga, Piglet, Pooh, Tigger, Eeyore, they're all, sentient stuffed animals. Actually, think about it, that doesn't really make that much of a point in things, but I just thought I should probably, specify there, because there is a bit of difference.
Just like the books they're based on, these films take place in the 1920s, though Christopher Robin's imagination is the magic that brought Pooh and his friends to life in this case. Then The Fox and the Hound is set in the rural United States, probably in the 1930s, based on the technology we see in the sequel, because, of course, there's a Fox and the Hound too. Is nothing sacred? I guess not, because then there's...
I mean, for a while there... Well, I mean, even now there isn't really with all the live-action quote-unquote remakes.
Peter Pan: Return to Neverland, set in London during 1941. We know this because it takes place during the Blitz, the World War II bombing campaign against the United Kingdom.
And again, say what you will about this movie, because it's not that good in a lot of aspects, but the fact you have Spitfires chasing a flying pirate ship, that is just awesome.
And around the same time, there's Dumbo and Bambi, both set in the United States around the time of their release, 1941 and 1942 respectively. Up next, there's a bit of an interesting case. At the same time, we have the films Saludos Amigos, The Three Caballeros, and Fun and Fancy Free, all of which take place in roughly the mid-1940s. Just like The Black Cauldron, I figured that these would be very difficult to place because they so heavily feature societies full of humanoid animals similar to The Sorcerer's Apprentice. But other films don't have those characters or peoples as widespread, if at all. Well, the solution was quite obvious.
Racism.
Fun and Fancy Free introduces the idea that these films with these characters are literally stories being told or heard in-universe by Jiminy Cricket. That's what's happening here. It's just like The Matrix, we're 2 layers deep with these films and their segments being stories inside of the Disneyverse.
Okay. I didn't think that's where they were going to be going with this. Okay, I guess it works. Wait, does that mean that, wait, so is that going to mean that, So does that mean that the Robin Hood and the movie and Zootopia are both going to be in people's imaginations? Okay, well, I mean, that seems like a bit of a cop-out, but let's see what they do with this.
Likely influenced by stories or historical records of stuff like The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Now, I know that we've been glossing over most of the sequels unless they were main movies like Frozen 2, or they were needed to help place a film in our timeline here. But we have to talk about Atlantis again. Yeah, the direct-to-video sequel Atlantis, Milo's Return, takes place in the 1940s after World War II.
Which, again, the whole thing, it falls into a similar thing with Moana, where it was originally going to be a show, but instead of Moana 2, where, you know, they rewrote the script and stuff and made it into a single movie, with this, I think they literally just took the episodes and re-edited them into a single movie.
For 30 years after the main events of the first film. The movie...
30 years? Jeez, Milo's looking good.
It also ends with Atlantis returning to the surface, which will have a big impact on technology in the future. Trust me, we'll get there. Oh, and also, just before we move on, Atlantis 2 also lets us slide in the classic Disney animated series Gargoyles into the timeline. See, Milo's Return was originally going to be a spin-off series called Team Atlantis, which was canceled after The Lost Empire bombed at the box office. Well, one of the episodes of Team Atlantis was going to feature Demona, a main antagonist from Gargoyles. And this wasn't just like a random idea they had a script done. This basically opens up all of the mythology touched by Gargoyles and fits it into the Disneyverse, including their versions of Odin, Puck, King Arthur, and Avalon. Guess the kid from Sword in the Stone had a major glow-up, didn't he?
Really? Interesting. That's really interesting. No, does that really count? Because, again, Gargoyles was a TV show, not a movie. And the Atlantis sequel didn't actually have Demona in it itself. It just would have been there if the show had actually continued.
Honestly, this one is just a bit of selfish leak content because Gargoyles was such a formative part of my childhood. This might not fit 100% with everything else here, but just let me have this one, okay? Something that is clear and does fit in, though, Encanto, with all of its star magic packed inside of the casita, is up next, set in 1950s Colombia. This is 50 years after the Madrigal family fled their home due to some sort of Colombian conflict, likely the Thousand Days War, which happened around the year 1900. Bruno also references telenovelas, which didn't really become a thing until the 50s, so it fits.
So what do you like? What do you like? You like sports?
Game show.
Telenovelas.
And a thing that was also around in the 50s? Dalmatians. Over 100 of them, in fact. Yeah, right after Encanto, we have 101 Dalmatians set in London, though the date's a bit funky. Why? Well, we see a calendar that suggests 1954, but a newspaper that states 1958. It's possible that someone could have had a calendar that long that was just out of date, but just to be on the safe side, we're actually going to place this movie and its sequel in late 1960 and early 1961. This is because its sequel, 101 Dalmatians 2, Patch's London Adventure, has multiple newspapers from 1961. Also, real quick, it's just truly tragic they didn't name this sequel 102 Dalmatians. Like, that title is one of the few things a live-action remake did better than the animation.
I remembered 102 Dalmatians. I completely forgot it was a sequel to the live-action one. I thought it was, like, later on in the animated timeline. Okay, there you go. That's a huge missed opportunity on their part.
Continuing our trend of classic animal movies, next up we have The Rescuers, set during the time of its release in 1977, with the bulk of the story taking place in a Louisiana bayou. Man, Louisiana in the Disneyverse gets real busy, doesn't it? Anyway, we also know that the sequel, The Rescuers Down Under, takes place in Australia during 1979, all thanks to this shot of a calendar. It also lines up with the fact that Bernard and Bianca get engaged in this movie, and marriage proposals typically happen after about 2.5 years of dating. The timeline just matches perfectly, even if we are talking about a movie with talking mice and a grand mouse society. But counter to that, we also have some pretty normal animals living in human society, like those we see in Oliver and Company. This film is set in New York City in 1988, the year it was released, which we can confirm thanks to another calendar. Also, before you mention it, yes, this movie does have a lot of familiar-looking dogs from other Disney films, but we know that they're not the same animals and that they can't live that long, so we're just gonna chalk this up to animals of the same breed and same species just looking similar.
I mean, makes sense to me.
I mean, it's like not every deer can be Bambi's mom, even if the animation is copied wholesale. And from here, we're actually done with the 20th century. Well, unless you want to count Gargoyles, the lion's share of which takes place in the 90s, but again, that's
not a movie.
But regardless, now, moving into the 21st century, we have a movie that's going to introduce a lot of big ideas for the Disneyverse. See, Earth was not the only planet in the Disneyverse to have life develop on it, or technology supercharged by star magic. No, there's actually tons of these, enough to form a government in the Milky Way galaxy known as the United Galactic Federation. This is a powerful faction who keep an eye over thousands of planets, and have laws against certain science that would go against the natural order of things, the natural way of star magic. They believe this so much that by the year 2001, they arrest Dr. Jumba Jookuba for creating a new species and seek to destroy his work.
It is an affront to nature. It must be destroyed.
How do we know all this? Well, it's all thanks to Lilo and Stitch. Yeah, we see the Galactic Federation in action in this movie, and we know that it takes place in the year 2001 thanks to the date that we see on Stitch's adoption paper after he escapes to Earth and starts his life on Hawaii. Also worth noting that Earth's history with weird sentient animal creatures is kind of on display in this movie. Like, very few people call out how weird the aliens look when they're visiting Earth, and they've put on some very bad disguises.
I mean, you never know. People in this universe just might be really stupid. Either that or, you know, it's Hawaii. They could be just really used to very ugly tourists constantly showing up.
People are just being polite. After all, this is a planet that's had everything from dragons to talking mice to giant talking mice. Anyway, the existence of this Galactic Federation has some pretty wild implications later on, but for now, well, even with the boost from Atlantis, the technology on Earth has a bit more to go before it can catch up with this Galactic Federation, but that doesn't mean it isn't impressive. Why do I say that? Well, because of Meet the Robinsons. Yeah, I forgot about this one too, but this movie starts in the year 2007 before we have a 30-year time jump giving us a glimpse into the future. This is spelled out pretty clearly in the film's marketing. Anyway, this film involves a lot of time travel, which allows its main character Lewis to see where technology is headed and really help further accelerate scientific development when he goes back to 2007.
Which, again, a lot of bubble travel going on there. I don't know how I feel about that.
Man, time travel always complicates things, doesn't it? Something less complicated, though, is Bolt, set around its release date in 2008. Nothing super eventful there. But more eventfully, around this time, we also have Wreck-It Ralph and Ralph Breaks the Internet, set at roughly the same times as their release dates, 2012 and 2018 respectively.
Oh god, Wreck-It Ralph is such a good movie. Why'd they have to ruin it with Wreck-It Ralph Breaks the Internet?
The sequel even acknowledges the 6-year time difference.
Look, I get it. You've been married 6 years. You're looking to spice things up.
This shows us that technology has advanced more quickly than in our world, enough so that characters in video games and online are sentient. Though I will say these movies are a bit weird in the context of the Disneyverse. After all, Ralph Breaks the Internet confirms that the Walt Disney Company straight up exists in the Disneyverse, along with the Disney princesses, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, and the Muppets. And while that is a weird quirk, it's not exactly impossible.
I mean, Marvel Comics exists in the Marvel Comics, so it's not out of, it's like, you know, it's not out of bounds or anything. Oh, again, Ralph Breaks the Internet. Why? Why'd you have to remind me that movie exists?
Like, Disney could exist in the Disneyverse, creating films and merch and attractions based off of real-world history. So, instead of making movies about fairy tales like Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella and the rest, they're just making movies based on the true stories of Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella and the rest. They even go as far as to, like, straight up joke about this in some of their movies.
I like to see the movie they make about you now.
I just hope they stay true to what really happened.
They might even make a motion picture about you.
And like, honestly, this isn't even unprecedented in Disney's sphere. A fictional version of Marvel Comics literally exists in the main Marvel continuity, publishing comics based on the adventures of the characters that exist in that universe. It's fun and it's weird and it's meta, but it's not
what are you gonna do?
Speaking of superheroes, though, we now have to fast forward to the main events of Big Hero 6, set all the way in 2032. We know this because there are posters in the film pointing out that it's the 95th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge's opening. The bridge finished construction in 1937, so 95 years later would be 2032. This movie is our first real look at just how far advanced the technology in the Disneyverse has gotten thanks to the advancements of Atlantis and the star magic. Like, this movie gives us AI, fully functional robots, and tech advanced enough for there to be legitimate superheroes in the world all by the 2030s. Then, just to wrap up this part, we gotta return to 2037 and the future we saw in Meet the Robinsons. There's a lot of similar, yet just slightly more advanced tech here as compared to Big Hero 6, but the biggest thing that stuck out to me, it's seems
Talking
like
animals.
technology has gotten good enough to infuse regular animals with star magic that lets them speak, as we see with the genetically engineered frogs in this film.
Hey, Frankie, baby, you gotta tell us one of your jokes.
Man, this movie sure was. It was something. Okay, so now here
It's
is
a
where
good
things get
movie.
huge, wild, and crazy. Yeah, we're gonna see a massive time jump between Meet the Robinsons in 2037 and the next films in the Disneyverse timeline. And in that time frame, there are some big changes to the world.
Okay, so I was correct in saying that. So I was correct in saying that it's going to be, the pure animal movies were just going to be, far future, and it's going to be like a post-apocalypse or something where that just wiped all humans out.
To the whole galaxy. See, at some point, humanity must achieve interstellar travel and join the rest of the aliens up there in the stars. In fact, eventually, humanity leaves Earth altogether, and we know this thanks to what I'm gonna call the animal people movies. You know the ones. They have very humanoid-looking animals walking upright like they're people. At first, I wondered if they were like on their own planet, but we know that these humanoid animal movies have to take place on Earth.
Look on all the other planets, you can only find them right here on Earth.
So, how is that possibly going to fit? Well, if humanity leaves Earth and expands out into space with the Galactic Federation, that would give the sentient animals a chance to rise up and be the new people of Earth. And we actually know that this is something that some of the talking animals on Earth have wanted for a while. In the Jungle Book, King Louie explains,
I want to be like you.
and in Wish, the goat goes even further.
I dream of a utopian metropolis where all mammals are equal.
And wear clothes.
So, now that humanity has gone on to greener pastures in the stars, the talking animals take the chance to make Earth their own, where they can evolve into their own societies and eventually become more humanoid. Early on, they look a bit like civilizations from Earth's past, and even reuse old names for their peoples and their governments. This is where we find Robin Hood in our timeline. During this period, a lot of predators from the top of the food chain are in charge, like the lions King Richard and Prince John. I mean, heck, even Robin Hood and Maid Marian are foxes. This ingrains a lot of prejudice into this society, even hundreds of years later. Like in Chicken Little, where a fox bullies Chicken Little and his friends, and in Zootopia, where a lion is elected mayor, though predators are often stereotyped as violent. Thankfully, by the end of that movie, they do seem to be working towards a more equal society, which is great. You love to see it. And just the cherry on top of this, we know that this strange version of Earth full of talking animals is a bit of a tourist destination for aliens in the Galactic Federation.
We stop here every summer on the way to the in-laws.
Every year.
Yeah, we see in Chicken Little that some animals come by this planet every year, like it's an apple orchard or amusement park.
Okay, so sorry, I'm just trying to absorb all this. Humanity didn't, go extinct or anything. They just left Earth wholesale. Like, completely. And then that's when, the talking animals take over and and society kind of reboots. Okay. Sure, let's go with that.
But perhaps they should have been focusing their attention elsewhere, because at some point, this entire Galactic Federation must collapse or change drastically. Perhaps this was due to some sort of galactic-wide catastrophe, maybe some sort of civil war. We just don't have enough information to say. But what we can say for sure, space pirates took advantage of this chaos with the likes of Captain Nathaniel Flint gathering a vast hoard of treasure and hiding it on planets throughout the galaxy, while the remnants of the Federation likely reformed into some sort of monarchy with a navy and interstellar academy to train new recruits.
Right, again, Treasure Planet, one of my favorite movies, but I had completely forgotten that they were going to have to try to fit it into the timeline, and its weird, like, 70-30 split of old school and new school technology. Of course that causes things to break and go all weird. Okay. I'm gonna be, completely honest here. I've been really liking the timeline up until this point, but now that they've gotten into the quote-unquote future, you're starting to lose me here. This is, granted, I know that the whole trope of, galactic federations or civilizations collapsing and they fall back on, older technology and stuff. That's basically what 40K is. But the fact that you had, ships like that before, like you see in Lilo and Stitch and stuff like that, and something happens and they fall back to the point where they make solar powered sailing ships that look like ocean-going sailing vessels. God, I'm just trying to think of the line of progression that goes there. Because, you know, solar-powered ships, yeah, I can totally understand that. But why would you go from where you were to making them look like ocean-going vessels if they're not designed to go in the water? Like, that's one of the things I like about, you know, Space Battleship Yamato, the anime and stuff like that. You know, the human warships, at the very least, they look, you know, like World War II-esque warships and stuff like that, but they're fully capable of landing and floating in the water. What is... brain not braining?
But why do I say all of this? Well, because the Galactic Federation we see in Lilo and Stitch is nothing like the galaxy we see in the last film in our timeline, Treasure Planet. Yeah, the super stylized technology and universe of this movie with all of its classic nautical ships and imagery is a far cry from the sleek sci-fi designs of Lilo and Stitch. Oh, and we know that bit about the monarchy rising up thanks to ships like the RLS Legacy. According to the spin-off game Treasure Planet Battle at Procyon, the ship prefix RLS stands for Royal Light Ship. Royal as in royalty, a king or queen. And
so wait a second, I think I remember that. Can't you get that game on Steam? Yeah, you can. Oh, wait, I own this? When did I buy this? Bought it back in 2020. Huh. Okay.
yes, we know that all of this has to be part of the same timeline as the Federation we see in Lilo and Stitch, because the young Jim Hawkins has a plush doll of Stitch in his room, meaning that the adventures of Experiment 626 must be well known enough in this world to become merchandisable. You know, real talk aside here, but Treasure Planet has always been in my top 3 favorite Disney animations. I wish it was more successful and we got more of it, but...
And you know what? You want to know the worst part is? They did it to themselves. They put out virtually no advertising. If you look back, they put out virtually no advertising on this or anything. It was just Disney hurt this movie themselves. I hate it.
Alas. And from here, well, there's nothing else. That's the entire Disney theory so far. The entire story of the Disneyverse by piecing together all of their movies and as best a way we could. Is some of it a bit janky? Yeah, there are a lot of films here with a lot of similar but slightly different ideas. But I think we did a really good job here. Our team, our editors and researchers really crushed it on this just massive project. And honestly, this was just so much fun, and I can't wait to see where the future movies fit into the Disney theory. But until Disney releases a new movie, remember that it's all just a theory. A film theory. And cut.
Oh, God. As I said, I was liking where this was going. It's then when it got to the point where saying all of humanity just up and left Earth. But saying that Treasure Planet is the end of the timeline, I can get behind that. Treasure Planet definitely deserves, the spot on the pedestal there. Oh, God. You know what? I'll stick with my guns here and say this was a good theory. I do like it more than the Pixar theory. Again, mainly because they don't pick and choose what Easter eggs and stuff they use to, figure out, what's in there. And they just use literally everything. But at the same time, you get a bit shaky there near the end. I swear. Great theory, and even with how Disney is nowadays, I very much do hope that this Disney theory kind of gains more traction, becomes a bit more widespread, because again, I like this a lot more than the Pixar theory, and I kind of wanted to get more recognition and stuff. Oh, God. So, yeah, that's going to be it for now. So, yeah, of course, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video will lead to my Let's Play of the day instead of a game theory, because again, I'm not going to be watching that hour-long rehash. And yeah, with all that out of the way, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.